Hi guys, it's Mrs. Mattingly here, and I am going to read Addison Cooke and the Tomb of the Cod, chapter 43, and it starts on page 429. It's called Goodbyes. Dax had never heard Addison so silent. He put as many miles as he could between Addison and Mongolia and finally glided the Cessna into Exelon-Gol Airport in the remote northern regions of China. Mr. Jacobson looped alongside the group as they strode into the dusty terminal. Dax scanned the flights etched on a chalkboard. If you catch the connection to Beijing, there's a direct flight to London. You should be okay from there. Addison nodded. What about you, Dax? Where are you heading? Me? Dax pulled the toothpick from his mouth and flicked it into the nearest trash bin. He checked the wind direction and squinted to the west. I'm going to fuel up. The Cessna and work my way back to Tanzania. See if I can work my way back into poacher poaching. He looked at Addison and squeezed his shoulder. Take care, kid. And thanks. For what? For reminding me that I don't always have to look forward. Sometimes you can find your way by looking backwards. By looking back. Dax and Molly gave Molly's shoulder a squeeze as well. She shook his hand. Thanks, Dax. You saved our lives. Raj, unable to help himself, hugged Dax around his waist. Can I visit you in Africa sometime? Dax nodded and patted Raj on the back. Anytime. He gave Eddie a thumbs up, whistled to Mr. Jacobson, and strode out of the terminal. Addison pulled out Tony Chin's last credit card and turned it over in his hand. The lettering caught his eye. You know, I never noticed this, but these are Fang Casino business credit cards. Madame Fang must pay Tony's account. Eddie stared at Addison, mystified. So? So, said Addison, business or first class? With thunderstorm delays, Addison's team didn't land in London's Heathrow Airport until the following evening. Despite the first-class service, they were exhausted from travel and all the events of the previous weeks. They huddled together under the fluorescent airport lights, staring up at the departures with empty eyes. There's an 8:08 to New York, said Addison. Gate 47. You better hop. It's boarding soon. Aren't you coming? Asked Eddie. Molly and I aren't going back to New York. Molly stared at Addison in surprise. Addison had barely spoken in the past day. He'd been dreading this moment. There's nothing for us in New York, Eddie. Not the museum, not the apartment. It's not safe for us. As soon as Addison spoke, Molly saw the truth in his words. She still couldn't accept that Aunt Delia and Uncle Nigel were really gone. But without them, there would be no one to pay for their apartment rent, no one to feed them, no one to protect them from whoever was after them. What will you do? Raj asked quietly. Addison took a deep breath. He felt hollow inside, but he didn't want his friends to know how hopeless he felt at this moment. We're going to find our other uncle, Uncle Jasper. He's here in England. But you barely know him, said Eddie. We know him a little. We just haven't seen him in a few years. He's not crazy or anything. Addison answered diplomatically. He is eccentric, but so are we. And Uncle Nigel told me Uncle Jasper will know how to keep us safe. Addison felt for the medallion in his pocket and added, He'll have the answers that we need. You could stay with us on 86th Street, said Eddie. Raj nodded. You could stay with me if you don't mind sharing the apartment with my 3 sisters. Addison shook his head. I don't know what this prophecy is. I don't know who these people are or what they want, but I know I can't put you in danger. Raj's brow creased with worry lines. What about junior high? What about our adventures? Addison shook his head again. He didn't know. Goodbye, Raj. Goodbye, Eddie. He meant to shake their hands, but he found he was hugging them. Raj gripped him tightly. That river. It was white water. Your aunt and uncle have a chance, Addison. Thanks, Raj. Raj turned and hugged Molly as well. If there's ever anything you need, I'll call a code blue, said Molly. Unable to speak more, Addison turned and left. Molly followed at his side. It took them an hour to pass through customs and get their passports stamped. When they finally stepped out of the arrivals terminal and onto the wet sidewalk, Addison found his Uncle Jasper's address in his notebook. He turned up the collar of his blazer and hailed a cab in the London rain. The black hackney cab left the hustle-bustle of the big city. Addison pulled out Uncle Nigel's medallion. Streetlights flickered on the metal and played on the ornate Latin inscriptions. He noticed a date engraved on the back and ran his thumb over it. 1307. The tires hissed on wet pavement through the quiet suburbs. Soon they reached the countryside, dark and soundless but for the howling wind and tapping rain. They were far from the lights of civilization. Molly peered out of her rain-streaked window. Addison, where are we? I have no idea. At last the hackney turned off the main road, past a wrought iron gate, and drove down a long driveway lined with towering pillars of Italian cypress. The driveway circled around a lake, through an orchard, and past a stable. It reached a sprawling lawn the size of a football field, the grass somewhat weedy and forlorn. An old gazebo, cracked and overgrown with vines, leaned beside a broken fountain. The cab continued around a stand of apple trees, and a massive stone building loomed out of the darkness.
Mommy.
It
Where's the last page?
figured... Hold on. Missed the page. It featured Gothic spheres and flying buttresses, and crenulations crowning the bastions of towers. This is not a small house, said Molly in wonder. That's no house, said Addison. It was a castle. That's the end.